Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Lenny from Literary Gladiators, and as I warned you in the last video, I will be wearing the same clothes because this is the moments after I recorded the last video. So today I'll be talking about Dark Tower, Book 7 by Stephen King, which is called The Dark Tower. This is technically the final book in the entire first run of the series, but there is other books that you could check out if you are interested in these. He did a pretty great comic book adaptation, which goes back to Roland's beginnings. We get kind of that full story there, which he does tell in Wizard and Glass and even in the Gunslinger, the first book and the fourth book. But it's the art starts off very beautiful. It's well written. I'm pretty sure Stephen King actually had a hand in it as well. And then there's a book, I believe they call it like 4.5. So this is also during Wizard in the Glass when they're in the subway station. And that one is more of a story within a story. So it opens up with, I'm sorry, that's called The Wind Through the Keyhole. And that one, it opens up with Roland. Basically, he's telling like fairy tales of his childhood. So not even his history or things like that, but it's like a fairy tale of the childhood. That one I wasn't really too fond of. But just so you have an idea of some other books you could check out in the Dark Tower series. There's also short stories, which were also adapted into the comics. The one that jumps out is called The Little Sisters of Illyria, something like that. And that's in, you can find in Stephen King's short story collections. That follows a younger Roland as well. And then finally, the last book that I can think of offhand that is technically, again, his whole universe, Stephen King's whole universe is connected to the Dark Tower, but the last one I can think of that is connected almost somewhat directly is called The Eye of the Dragon, which there is a character named Roland. You have Walter or Martin, I don't remember which name he's going by, but that one's like a high fantasy book. That one's very much like in the vein of like Lord of the Rings. Okay, so on to The Dark Tower, final book. Okay, so starting with Wolves of the Kala, Stephen King really like heavy hit how our world is connected to Roland's world. And Stephen King even put himself inside of the novels, and he continues to do that in here. So I'm not going to go too heavy on spoilers here, except for the ending. I want some of the impacts to hit you hard like they did me the first time if you haven't read this. While the book is not the greatest, it's definitely not the least in the series. Sadly, this would be my second least favorite book in the series after Song of Susanna. I say sadly because this is the wrap-up. This is what we've been waiting for, especially if you had read the books from the beginning, which I did not. Like when they first came out, I ended up reading, I didn't have to wait like 20 years between books. That's an exaggeration. Because I started reading them right before Wolves of the Kala came out, which then led into the last two books. So this book, well, let's just say Roland, he succeeds. There's your spoiler. I'm sorry, I should have said that first. He succeeds, but there are a lot of heavy losses. So he does reach his tower. He does get in there, and I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens in there, but I will tell you what happens after. So once Roland is in the tower, basically, he doesn't have to fight the Crimson King. There's a really, for me, it was like a really bad ending, cop out, but he ends up waking up and the whole story starts over again. So in The Gunslinger, the book opens with Men in Black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. And that's how this book ends. So Roland starts his quest over because he doesn't succeed in the way he's supposed to. But we see that he made progress because there's this important horn, like a war horn, that he now has in his possession that was lost years ago. So that's showing this kind of this cycle of the journey he has progressed to go further. So we don't know how many times he's been on this journey. We don't know when the journey will end for him, but this actually leads into the movie. So in the movie with Idris Elba, it's supposed to be the more of a sequel to the books. It was still really bad, but it's supposed to be more of a sequel to the books. So that's where that went. I guess, I mean, I don't want to say more about the final book in the Dark Tower. I'd love for you to actually read it, make your own opinions. For me, it was not really a good book. It has its moments, like they all do. I always loved Roland and and his quartet. They're great characters. And again, whether Stephen King writes a good book or a bad book, the one thing you can count on in his books is that he has amazing characters. That's why I love reading Stephen King. I mean, you can usually be pretty guaranteed that it's going to be a ghost, a monster, an alien, or something that we're just not expecting in the story. But the characters are written so strongly, and these characters are no different. So just to wrap up my final thoughts on the Dark Tower series, I really do love the series as a whole. It's just it didn't end maybe how I wanted it to, but I feel like it's kind of universally panned for its ending. But Stephen King will say something along the lines of, "That's just how the story wrote itself," and as a writer, I understand to an extent. But I was disappointed in the ending. What I would love is a faithful adaptation into a movie or a television series. It would probably be better off in a television series. I do believe they are trying again. The movie with Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey was, again, really bad. It had its moments, just like the last couple books in the series, but for the most part, it was a bad adaptation. You can't fit this type of world into a 2-hour movie. There's too much to tell. There's too much lore there. I think with that, I'm going to stop rambling now. So, Dark Tower series, hopefully you've been reading them as we've been going along. Hopefully, if you haven't read them, the spoilers didn't ruin it for you, and you'll go and read them for yourselves, because as usual with anything, don't go by critics, don't go by people's thoughts and reviews. If it's something that sounds interesting to you, read it, watch it, do it. Because clearly we all have different experiences and different opinions on things. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you in my next video. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.